Let's take a look at our section on financial models. In this section, we're going to start with some formulas, and let's go ahead and jot some of these down first before we get started on some of our examples. We're going to be looking at a couple different ways to calculate interest, and our first formula is going to be on simple interest. Our formula is I equals P times R times T. And we'll talk about what each of these letters stands for here in a second. Let's go ahead and do our next two formulas as well. Our second one is on compound interest. Our formula there is A equals P times, and then inside parentheses, we have 1 plus, and then this is a fraction, R over N. And then we have an exponent on that set of parentheses. The exponent is going to be N times T. And then our last formula up here is if we're taking a look at continuous compounding. This formula is known as PERT. So A equals P times E, and the exponent on that E is the power R times T. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what each of those letters stands for. P is going to represent your principal or the amount that you are investing. The letter R is going to represent our interest rate, and we want to make sure we're writing our interest rate as a decimal. The letter T is going to represent time, and when we're working with our financial models, time is going to be measured in years. So you want to make sure you're careful when you're working with certain problems. For example, if they tell you that you're investing a certain dollar amount for 6 months, recall that 6 months would be equivalent to half a year, so your time in that case would be 0.5, not 6. The letter N is going to represent the number of compounding periods. We're going to come back and talk a little bit more about how to find those N values in a second. Let's talk about the last couple letters that we have and what they represent. And our last two letters, A is going to represent the final amount of money that we have after our investment, and I is going to represent the interest that we earned. Now let's go talk more about these N values when we have compounding periods. When you're working with compounding periods, you're going to be looking for some of these keywords: annually, semi-annually, quarterly, monthly, or daily. Those are the words you're going to be looking for, and that's going to give you a clue as to what the N values represent. Keep in mind, if something occurs annually, then that means it happens once a year. Our N value in that case would be 1. If something happens semi-annually, that means it happens twice a year. Our N value in that case would be 2. And our last couple here, if something happens quarterly, that means it happens 4 times a year, so our N value is 4. If something happens monthly, that means it's going to happen 12 times a year, so our N value is 12. And our last one, if something occurs daily, we're going to use an N value of 365 for these problems. We're not going to worry about any leap years, so we'll just count 365 days in a calendar year.